If you want to be nuking bosses, whether it be in the Catacombs, the Raid, or any content in New World Aeternum, this video is for you. I'm breaking down everything we know about PvE DPS in Season 10, what's good, what's bait, and what's going to end up getting you kicked from the group. I'm going to be breaking this into a few different categories. First, we'll talk about weapon combos, what they mean, and how to properly run them. Then we'll talk about gear that's going to be good across the board for all DPS. And then finally, where to get the gear and how exactly your progression should look across the board. Let's dive into weapon combos first, because everyone is asking me this question on stream and it's starting to make me go insane. Alright, let's break down the top DPS combos you can rock in Season 10. Right now, you need to get Inferno. This is non-negotiable. You have to have this if you want to play damage in dungeons and raids. This will give you 15% damage when you hit a target within 15 meters, skyrocketing your damage to the stratosphere. But how can we get this DPS necessity? Open up your map and head over to Great Cleave. There will be a dungeon called Imperium Force. This has to be mutated or you will not be able to get it. Meaning, since it's mutated right now, you have to lock in and go farm it. It'll take you about 5 times to grab this bad boy. Bam, we got the best DPS artifact come Season 10. Now, what exactly can we pair with this thing and why? The best weapons to pair with the Inferno will be Rapier and Hatchet. This is due to the amount of damage these weapons can pump in a raid. Rapier and Hatchet, they both spam a lot of light attacks and they're very good at self-peeling because they come with something like Evade and Flurry, giving you some extra survivability on the board. Or you can run this type of tree here where you have the riposte as well, giving you even more survivability for your DPS. For Hatchet, you would drop social distance here and run rending throw. This applies to rend to the boss, allowing your teammates to do 20% additional damage, skyrocketing your success rate through the roof. These aren't the exact trees, but I just want to give you a rough breakdown. But there is still a lot of other roles that have to be filled while DPSing. Let me break those down as well so you understand what else can be a top dog. Greatsword is still going to be a phenomenal option if you run Serenity, or you can pair it with Inferno as well. That will do a lot of damage, but right now it's looking to be a half a tier below the Inferno Rapier Inferno Hatchet combo. But don't worry, there are still other combos we can run with Greatsword. Greatsword Hammer or Greatsword SNS is looking to be the tanking option come Season 10. Choose whichever one you're more familiar with or whichever one you enjoy, as they're both shaping up to be really good. Next up, we have CC pulling. When you're doing a dungeon or raid, there'll be a lot of enemies you have to pull and keep them in one place. That is where Great Axe comes in. You'll only need about one player running this for the Maelstrom and Gravity Well. Pair that with Reap and the mobs will never be moving. And now, arguably the most important role in PvE DPSing is the Rend bot. This doesn't get a lot of credit as you're not hitting crazy damage numbers, but you are the most important part of the team. You will have to have a Warhammer here, Shockwave, Clear Out, and Path to Destiny here all have Rends. These will give you maximum damage to the boss for you and your party. You have to pair that with either Spear or SNS for even more Rends, as Spear has Pref right here, and Skewer has a Weaken. This will allow the boss to do less damage to you and your party, drastically increasing everyone's survivability. While Pref rate, well, this is Rends the boss even more, allowing your team to do more damage. Now, this Rend bot is dependent on what the tank is running. So if the tank is running Greatsword Hammer, well then the Rend bot runs Spear SNS. If the tank is running Greatsword SNS, well then the Rend bot runs Warhammer and Spear. This is very important to know, as you don't want to be stacking the same weapons in a dungeon, as these buffs don't all stack. For example, if I have Spear dots on an enemy that have the bleeds from my, let's say, Skewer here, if another Spear player uses Skewer, whoever has the highest damage will only be dealing damage at the same time. Let me break that down and simplify it. If my bleed does 100 and his does 90, his bleed gets lost to the Shadow Realm as my bleed overtakes his, meaning his Spear is completely useless in that raid or dungeon. So making sure your party has a vast majority of different weapon combos is insanely important for hitting top damage. Now, there is another range weapon DPS combo that's looking to make it into the Nighthaven raid, and that's going to be Blunderbuss Firestaff. This thing is looking to shape up as one of the most important But once again, you have to pair that with Inferno for the extra 15% damage. This is critical to your success, and if you're missing any of these, well, then you're screwed. But what about the people who are less sweaty, like min-maxing, and they just want to enjoy the game? Are there other DPS options for you? Well, of course. You can run Musket Void Gauntlet or Bow Void Gauntlet or Bow Rapier and vice versa. This will allow you to do extra damage. Let me break down the artifacts you want for these as well. For Void Gauntlet, you want Life's Taker. Open up your map. Head down to Elysian Wilds and there'll be a giant monkey up here. And no, you cannot negotiate bananas with him for the artifact. He will stomp you dead. So sadly, you have to put him out of his misery and get the beautiful Void Gauntlet artifact. For the finisher, it's about the same thing. You'll have to kill mammoths. And the reason for this is because this gives you 15% additional damage. This damage allows your secondary weapon to really shine, and that's why you have to run stuff like this. Now, the only weapon I didn't cover on here was Ice Gauntlet. Ice Gauntlet can be a DPSing weapon as it has access to Tomb or Pylon, Ice Storm, and Ice Spike, and this was a very popular combo back in the day. But sadly, the meta has kind of shifted away from it. You can still run it as a good back bar, but never a primary bar. And Void Gauntlet Life Staff is what the healers should be running, as this allows your team not only to get heals from the Life Staff, but an insane amount of buffs from the Void Gauntlet that are a necessity to clear dungeons efficiently. Now that all the weapon combos are out of the way, let me break down exactly how to get this, what perks we'll need for these type of weapons, and what our attribute split should be looking like across the board. Alright, the combos are out of the way. Let's break down the artifact that you'll have to run with every one of these builds. It's going to be Old Crown and Nimble. Old Crown is very important as this gives you +6 attributes things, so that means you'll have an additional 6 strength, dex, intelligence, focus, and constitution. This will give you higher DPS overall, and that's why it's so important to run. This will also allow you to slot 3 gem slots on here, which are extremely strong in Season 10, as gems reduce damage not only by 2%, but you can get a rune glass that will allow your class to do an additional 1 to 2% extra damage depending on your build. This will allow you to have the highest damage overall out of any artifact, except one, and that is going to be Nimble Cloak. Nimble Cloak here is more for the ability reliant DPS builds. Example, Rapier. Rapier loves abilities, so this is what you would run on the Rapier build, where the Old Crown would be much better on something like a Greatsword build, where a Greatsword doesn't need abilities to feel relevant. And it's kind of just, you'll have to know which one is exactly best to slot for your class. Where do you get these two artifacts? Well, they both drop from the PvP artifact. The best way to farm the PvP tracks is simple. Hit activities, either run 3v3s or capture the flag. This is right now the fastest way to level this bad boy up. Pick whichever game mode you prefer and just roll with it. Have fun, enjoy the chaos, and maybe get top of the leaderboards if you're cracked. Send me a screenshot, I would love to see the top kills. But what about Jewelry Artifact? Jewelry Artifact is not nearly as important as, well, perks. More on perks here in a second. If you want to have a bit extra survivability while you're going into the dungeon, and you don't trust your healer or tank to do their job, I highly recommend picking up Blood Drinker. This gives you a lot of lifesteal and allows you to self-sustain extremely well. If you're ever dropping by the stream, you'll see I'm able to catacomb tier 3 bosses virtually alone, as I'm able not only to kill them, but self-sustain the entire fight with 0 heals from my teammates. That is the power of Blood Drinker, folks, so I highly recommend grabbing it. Open up your map if you want this monstrosity. Come over to Starstone Barrels and it's time to run some more mutations. Once again, the second that circle drops, that means the artifact in that dungeon can no longer be acquired. So please, at the moment, go and grab this artifact as well. You got a lot of dungeons to run, but trust me, your future self will be thanking you. Alright, artifacts are done, dusted. How about Heartrune? I personally still love Stalwart Heartrune form, even for PvE, as this is kind of like an old crap button. You gain Fortify and Mending form here and give you a lot of extra healing. This comes from Lazarus. It does not need to be mutated. But other heart runes that people like to run are Detonate here. It gives you a big Bomba. This comes from Anid and Vines. I don't have Vines, but Vines is there for the rend. Pick one of those heart runes that you want and go with it. All 3 are fine, just depending on the content you're running. Now that we've talked about artifacts, weapon combos, it's time to break down perks and how to exactly to min-max your gear run. Alright, chat, let me break down how exactly you can get a storage as full as mine. This thing is absolutely shaking to the brim with gear, but how exactly did I farm it all? Well, hit G on keyboard and mouse if you're a goat like me and head over to this beautiful place called the Tower of Sun. Here, you'll climb all the way to the peak, and there'll be these two bosses spawning on about a 15 to 20 second cooldown. X up in the chat and just sit there and AFK. This will allow you to get a bunch of different drops across the board. Now, this won't be best in slot, but this will allow you to start your journey, as this will give you a lot of solid gear overall and allow you to look for weapons and armor that you can slot to allow you to run into PvE with. Tip here, this does not drop jewelry, so rings, amulets, and earrings cannot drop in that location. So keep that in mind. If you're looking for jewelry, that's not the place for you. What happens if I want all types of gear? I recommend hitting enter in the chat and hitting feed. After you hit feed here, you'll have to look for XECR or X something. If you're seeing an X, I recommend just hitting X tribe, XECR, and joining up. Most likely, this will have to do with an elite chest run. These elite chest runs are scattered around the map. You'll have one in Cutlass Keys, Elysian Wilds, over here in Ebonscale. What a beautiful view. W's in the chat for Ebonscale. Brimstone Sands, the desert. Don't worry, the chest run's not dry like the desert, so you'll still get some good loot. Shattered Mountain, Eden Grove, all the way down to Reekwater, Shrek Swamp. Those all have elite chest runs. Whenever you hit an X, look through all of those zones and see if you see some black dots or some colorful ones. And bam, head over there and start trucking it, as those chests will give you a plentiful of good loot. Not only will it drop multiple pieces of legendary gear, but it also will drop you some nice Umbral shards, allowing you to hit your 4K weekly cap. But that's the most basic level of entry and how to farm gear. Once you have some solid gear across the board, well, it's time to upgrade and start getting a bit more frisky with our time. Let's head over to the Catacombs. The Catacombs has some actually really good DPS set, the Overcharge set. I believe this is what everyone's going to be running come Season 10 in terms of DPS. This has nothing to do with PvP, but you will need this set if you want to PvP, because the PvP sets, well, that's in the raid. In order to get into the raid, you will need an Overcharge set. So you'll need a lot, and I mean a lot of tokens. This will require you to farm the Catacombs. I recommend finding at least one person, a friend, join a company or something, because running these solo, well, I already would have uninstalled. So make sure you got at least someone with you so you have some peace of mind. A quick tip for the Catacomb, put on exactly what I'm running, full heavy, Serenity, Carnelian Sword, and slap that Blooddrinker in. Then basically you don't even need teammates, you're your own walking raid boss. I'll make a whole guide about my build for Catacombs and PvP later down the line, so stay tuned for that. And while you're at it, like and subscribe and comment down below what you want to see next for my YouTube content. And then after we get Catacombs, where do we want to go next? Next, we want to go to the raid. The raid has some phenomenal gear that is extremely hard to get. Fun fact, no one on any server has completed the raid. That means, even a couple days in, I believe only the first boss has been cleared, so we're still a long ways away from completing this, and that shows you the importance of gear. Perks and gear score matter a lot in Season 10, so make sure you're staying on top of the news, or you'll be left behind. But there's a few good perk sets in here, such as my personal favorite, the Enrage set. This thing is an absolute monstrosity, giving you about 10% extra damage. You'll take a bit in return, but this is what I'm aiming for, both for PvP and PvE. So this is where I would say is the endgame content at right now. But you can also get gear from the PvP track. It will be greatly fantastic for your inventory, and if you can acquire it, I highly recommend farming this as well. Amazing artifacts drop from here, good gear can also drop, and only certain set bonuses can drop from the PvP track. Once again, load up your Capture the Flag and arenas in order to farm that. Now that we know how to get gear, where to get it, what's important, and why, let's break down the perks that we want to be aiming for the vast majority of DPS builds. First of all, I want to address the elephant in the room. Right now, people are stacking old Enchanted Ward with new Enchanted on it. This will be getting removed come next patch. Do not waste your gold on this. People have been running this and showing this off. This will be getting hot fixed. Old enchanted and new enchanted cannot stack in this season, and they're going to be hot fixing this. This is a major alert because I know people have invested gold already. And I'm sorry to say, if you're one of those people, well, you're out of luck because you're not going to be getting refunded. Now I got that out of the way. Let's break down exactly what we want to be looking for on the new pieces of gear. 1, if you see any unique perks like this, like Terminal Vengeance would even be good, that in a raid set. Life Sealer Straw, just for extra sustain. These 1 perkers, make sure you keep these no matter what, as these should be in theory good for every build in the game. DPS and tank, maybe not healer. But a DPS perk that should be good is Prolonged Favor, as this will increase limited duration buffs on you by about 10% when fully maxed out. Meaning certain buffs that you can apply to yourself will be extremely valuable, as usually these give you more damage across the board, allowing you to pump. Next up, you want to make sure you have Sacrificial Empowerment on every piece of gear for DPS. This is non-negotiable. This increases your base damage by approximately 1.5. It was so good, I even went out and bought a piece from the faction vendor. This thing is an absolute beauty, and I highly recommend picking this up. Pretty much best in slot, in my opinion, for PvP. So if you're a PvP rat, go and buy this from the faction vendor right now. At that point, I would say that's pretty much best in slot for armor for DPS. What you really want though is a gem slot. This is a must, and then you want 2 offensive slots on top of that. This is because this will give you the max DPS overall. Before I get into charms, let me break down jewelry. Jewelry, you just want to look for things that give you more damage. So on your ring, there'll be things that give you more damage. Look for stuff like that. That is crucial. There's a lot, so I won't be going over all of them. But think about what your build does, and does that damage multiplier add to your build? If yes, keep it. But I would say the most important ones would be stuff like enchanted skill and thrust damage. These are a necessity, and once again, always look for a gem slot, as that's not only 2% damage reduction, but 1 to 2% damage increase. Then on top of that, you always want to look for offensive slots if you're DPS, and defensive charms if you're, well, a tank. For earring, the main perk you want to be looking for is Despised if you're a tank, and the opposite, I believe, is called Beloved if you're a DPS or healer. One will generate more threat, making you more delicious, and the other one will make you look ugly like you've aged 50 years, and the boss doesn't want none of that. So make sure you have this on your earring. Very important for aggro, as you don't want the boss to suddenly look at you and think you're his next sweet honey pie. That's the tank's job, not yours. Also, I'd recommend getting Refreshing Toast if you can. It is very nice to have your potions up faster, but something I say it is even better than that, well, is the Refreshing perk itself. You have Refreshing Move when light and heavies reduce your active cooldowns by 1 to 2%, or you'll have Flat Refreshing, which reduces all cooldowns by 10%. That is the one you want on every build, DPS, tank, and healer. This is non-negotiable. And for perks such as Amulet, look for protection perks and stuff that gives you max HP, and that's just survivability across the board. And yes, even if you're DPS and healer, you still need survivability so you don't get one shot by the certain mechanics. No, you're not a god and you can't dodge everything, so this is here as a safety net to allow yourself to tank and deal damage while tanking. This is actually not only there as a safety net, but for optimal DPS. That breaks down the vast majority of perks we want to look out for. For weapons, it's way too difficult to break them down, but a good rule of thumb is Atunement is going to be very strong. Key note here, they are actually saying they're going to be nerfing these Atunement stacking builds. So if you've been playing New World, you've noticed you have some pieces of gear that will have up to 3 Attunements on them. They want diminishing returns on stuff like this, meaning if you have 3 Attunements, it's probably not going to be best in slot. Each Attunement will have its damage reduced by, well, maybe a couple percent. We don't know the exact numbers, we can only speculate, but 3 Attunement gear isn't going to be best in slot. You'll want stuff that applies other things, such as a good balance, like Trenching Crits and Attunement. Those are normal perks, they don't have the same name in them, meaning their damage will actually stack. Right now, we don't know exactly how this is going to work, so I can't give you perfect information, but just understand if you see a triple Attunement piece, it's going to be getting nerfed in the future, and we just don't know by how much. I want to give you a quick breakdown of how to split up your attributes for your DPS build. A strength and dex split, you want to even split across the board. If you're running Old Crown, you want to hit this 25 intelligent point here for the extra backstabbing around it. Critical hit chance. This will give you just more damage overall and is worth the extra points, trust me. If your build is more reliant on cooldown, hitting 25 focus is extremely valuable. And that's pretty much going to cover all the DPS loadouts. I can't go over tank or healer, but I would recommend for tanks hitting about 200 constitution and the rest into the stamina regen no matter what. At this point, you can choose to drop strength, but more into con if you want some extra survivability. The choice is yours. Alright, let's talk about charms. These gems are broken into 3 types: defensive, offensive, and skill. I'm sorry I can't tell you your skill charms because that's just too dependent on your build. But I can tell you about defensive and offensive charms, and trust me, this is what's going to make you or break your DPS. Defensive charms for everyone, boys. Every role needs this. The top one you want to have, no matter what, will be Enchanted Ward. You can stack this up to 5 times. This is non-negotiable. That is your baseline. For DPS, after this you want to focus on purely offensive after you get Enchanted Ward stacked. But I highly recommend slotting another extremely broken charm for every build called Keenly Fortify. This gives you 20% Fortify for 5 seconds on a 7-second cooldown. Translation: DPS uptime is 100%, boys. Tanks, vast majority of the time. Survival, absolutely insanity. Best charm in the game, put it on every build. The charm is so good, it basically makes it unkillable, almost. For tanks, what should you run in PvE in terms of other options? Wellness or Divines? Wellness boosts your magic XP, or Divines, this boosts healing from non-life-stealing sources, meaning if your healer has eyes, ears, and both hands, you'll survive the vast majority of dungeon mechanics. I know that's a lot to ask for, but pray to God you get lucky. Now, what should PvE DPS run? Now, let's talk about base damage versus empower. This is a very important mechanic in New World, so listen up. Anything that says harnessing counts as empower. Empower multiplies your base damage up to a cap of 50%. Rule of thumb, I would say at least stack 5 harnessing perks per damage. So if I'm running an Ice Gauntlet build, I would want 5 of these, and then I would stop trying to stack more harnessing, as at that point you'll just be getting diminishing returns, as you should be able to get 50% empower through other means. After you get your harnessing, I would say Vicious is next in line, especially if you're an ability oriented class. Flat 3% damage, you'll be critting all the time, as you'll be hitting the boss's juicy glutes. Next up, Enchanted. This increases light and heavy attacks by 2.3%, not as viable for every build, but top tier for stuff like Hatchet and Greatsword DPS. You could run Rogue, but some bosses don't have backs. Translation sometimes could be completely useless, so I would hold off until we know the raid boss loadout. No matter what though, you have to run Keenly Empower. This is a flat 13% damage to every build. Tanks, DPS, and healers, everyone should be running this, no exceptions. This will allow you to hit the Empower cap faster than my hairline is receding. You can only stack once, but is mandatory for success. Another mandatory perk in my opinion is Keenly Jagged. This is a flat dot, it cannot be stacked, but it has insane damage. One of these on your loadout is basically free power. So that's the charms, must have defensive and must have offensive. If you learned something new, smash that like button and subscribe and get ready, because tomorrow I'm dropping the PvP version of this guide, so all you PvP rats know to run for max combos. If you want more in-depth guides, check out my channel. I break down perk charm combos and min-max builds way in depth. This video's already been long enough, so I tried to keep it a bit more simple. Huge shout out to all my channel members. Your support keeps me rolling, and the stream's chaotic.